could you just tell us in your own words about what has led you to be a campaigner on this issue and what happened in 2020 that's brought you to this place?
So for anyone that isn't aware, back in 2020, an ex-partner of mine filmed us having sex without me knowing. So he had cameras around his garden and also inside his property, and I was not warned of that prior to the sexual intercourse. I was not told until after that actually 20 minutes of the footage had been recorded. I was then assured on that day that it would go no further than those four walls, that the footage would be deleted, and that is the last anyone would know about it. However, further on in that evening, I saw him send that to someone else via WhatsApp. So I then made him retract it, and I explained to him implicitly what would happen if that footage was ever to get into someone else's hands. I explained, is he aware of what revenge porn is? And that if it ever did go anywhere, I would then go on to call the police. I think my only regret in hindsight was not calling the police there and then, but I was hoping that it would never ever go any further than it did that day. 6 months down the line, I was then sent a screenshot of the footage in question from a fan of a TV show we'd both been on, and that fan was located in America. So as soon as I saw that image, I immediately knew that somehow the footage that I'd been told would never ever go anywhere had been spread globally online. I just wasn't aware of how or where it had came from. So obviously immediately I then asked this fan, where have you seen this? I was then told that it was on the person in question's verified OnlyFans account, Stephen Bears. But the person then deleted their account, the person that I was speaking with. So I then wasn't sure how to track it down. I wasn't sure how far it had gone. And my first thing was, if I can track down where it's come from, maybe it's not too late to stop too many people from seeing it. So I then went onto my Instagram and I just said, has anyone seen a video of me in said person's garden? If so, can you please send it to the email address that's on my account, which was my agent's details, which was actually my mother at the time. She was my agent at the time. And with that, we had about 100 different people messaging in with evidence of this video, not just from his OnlyFans account at this point. It had been spread to various different platforms. I think Pornhub, BritsXXX. There was multiple different platforms that were hosting this video. And it had already been hosted on the OnlyFans account for, I think, at least a month at that point. So unfortunately, by the time we were made aware that this was circulating on the web, millions of people had seen it, and it then just completely and utterly blew up. It went viral to a point I couldn't explain. My phone was just going off every 2 seconds, whereas people were getting it sent around WhatsApp groups, and this was a link that was just readily available to the public. I think, obviously, it absolutely horrified me that an individual had done this to me. But what most horrified me was that these platforms were hosting this video, which was unconsented. And for many of them, some of them did well, but many of them didn't. And for many that I tried to reach out to, I would get an automated response saying, we'll get back to you within 4 to 6 days. And I was speaking earlier with a metaphor of when something like this is happening, it is really like a house fire. And the quicker you can put it out, the quicker you can stop it. And unfortunately, in 4 to 6 days, your house has burnt down. Everyone knows about this video, your family, your workplace, your peers, and it's just too late. However, if you can get through to someone in the first 24 hours, you then have time to stop this going any further and potentially not ruining your life. But for me, it went as far as you can imagine, to the point where it was global.
And your first recourse was actually to social media, not to the police. Why was that?
I just think because I knew it was on some sort of a platform already, and I had such a big platform, I just think I assumed I could maybe find it before even calling the police.
And when you did go to the police, what sort of response did you get?
I had a very good response from the police. I know not everyone has the same experience, But immediately it was just, we're going to take your statement, we're going to do it from start to finish, and we're going to do everything we can to stop this from happening. But I think their immediate response was that they needed to arrest the man in question. However, he wasn't in the UK at the time, he was in Dubai. So I think they went round his house to look for evidence of the cameras and stuff like that. But it was quite a long time before we could actually get him into custody because he wasn't in the country.
And you said that you were first made aware of it by somebody in the US. Is that one of the big challenges, the global nature of the internet, that legislation in one jurisdiction may not cover others?
I think so. I think it was quite shocking that it took a month for me to even be aware that this footage was circulating online. I think one of the biggest challenges in general is I feel like these big social media companies who are hosting pornographic images and videos, they don't have any way of us getting through to them to report it when there is something unconsented there. And I think it shouldn't be like robots that you're getting through to when it's this important of a situation. It shouldn't be that hard to be able to get through to someone and just say, look, I'm not saying delete it, I'm not saying take this person's account down, I'm just saying can we pause it and then review it in a few weeks. And I think that's the biggest issue that we're dealing with at the moment.
That could give a breathing space for a victim if it could just be instantly paused.
Yeah.
And the tech would exist to do that it would then give people a chance to consider it more carefully.
Yeah, because then they could go back and review it, and if whoever's in it hasn't consented, then obviously it will never go back up. But if actually after review both people have consented, I don't feel there's an issue with that, and then the footage is still there to get put back on the platform. But I think if something gets reported to the level where you say this is me in a sexually explicit act and I have not given permission for it to be on your platform, it should be paused that day. It shouldn't be paused in 4 to 6 days.
And finally, your experience of the criminal justice system, what would you change, or do you feel that it worked for you?
I feel it worked very well for me. I do think it would be good if there is legal support for victims during the process, which is something that I think a lot of MPs have been discussing, because I just think for a lot of young women, you don't have anyone to go to sort of give you advice as you're going through this process, and I think it would be really nice if victims did have help.
Where would you think the advice should come from? Should police forces have a system in place so that there's support for the victim?
Yeah, I think a system in place, or I think what's being proposed is there would be a funding from the government to certain lawyers who could help support victims throughout their process, just to help them understand what their rights are, basically, and to just help them along it, because I think so many of them give up during the process because it's just too much for them, or they're not sure if they're doing or saying the right thing. Sometimes they feel like they're getting victim blamed slightly, and I think if they just had someone to lean on during the process, they wouldn't feel so much like they have to withdraw. They'd have an inner strength in them, and they would know what to do and what to say along the timeline of events. And
the timeline can be really long, so did you ever feel like giving up?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. There was times that I felt like giving up. Like, I felt like, I thought, first of all, I know that I now can't speak throughout this timeline until I get to the court process. So there were so many times I thought, shall I just give up so I can just speak my truth to the public? But I knew what I was doing I had to push on with no matter what. But there were so many times I did think, have I made the right decision?
And you waived your anonymity. At what personal cost to yourself?
I mean, I really do feel as though my anonymity was removed as soon as the video went up anyway, because everyone I knew, friendship-wise, colleague-wise, family-wise, which is your main concern when something like this happens, were already made aware of the video. So I really do feel like my anonymity didn't really exist. But when I did take the choice to obviously step up and speak about it publicly, yeah, I think I just felt I'd been at such an injustice, not just by the man that done it to me, but by the platforms that used me to make money on their behalf. They literally used this unconsented footage to make money off of me. And I just felt like it was something that I didn't ever want to happen in the future. And I honestly felt so like my voice didn't matter as an individual. It wasn't until people realised that potentially I had a platform that they made the necessary moves to take the footage down. But so many women I've spoken to just get ignored by these people. And I just felt like I needed to stand up and make some form of a change to help support others in the future.
Kate?